So today we have a new PC in the office here, and it is a very old and very obsolete platform. We're talking about an FX 4300 paired with an R7 250. Now sure, we're not going to be playing any sort of brand new titles, at least at respectable resolutions and frame rates, but we may still be able to get a little bored. But we still may be able to get a little bit more esports mileage out of this thing. Let's check it out. So for this system, I actually did a swap with a friend to upgrade his hardware a little bit and to get myself into this case, which is, in my mind at least, the best part about this build. We have front panel USB 3.0. We actually even have a 2.5-inch drive bay, hot swappable little mount here at the top that you can even just sort of pop on an SSD or pop on an external hard drive, which is something that I've never really seen on a case before, but could be very useful in the right person's hands. We have all the other normal sort of front panel things. We have several places to mount 3.5-inch drives as well as 2.5-inch drives, and ultimately this case actually looks really nice, especially once I got it cleaned up a little bit with the contrast between the black body and then the red motherboard tray and the red accents. So a red build in this system would likely look very, very good. So the main problem with this system is that the hard drive in it is just excruciatingly slow. It may sort of be on its way out. So I'm doing all of my testing with this system on an SSD because everything will just fly right along and it'll really feel snappy even with the older hardware. And then the power supply is sort of interesting in that it has a pretty bad coil whine for a while, but after it's on for a good long period of time, that coil whine actually has gone away. Though I've noticed if I shut down the system for a few minutes, come back to it, the coil whine is right back. So regardless, the power supply is hideous, and I want to put something in it that's it's definitely more efficient. It definitely feel more comfortable leaving in there, so it's going to be ripped out at a later date. The new power supply just isn't here yet, so I'm still going to be rolling with this old ketchup and mustard cable silver power supply that in no way matches anything going on with the build, but hey, it's what I have, so we're gonna roll with that. So like all of the FX processors, the 4300 actually overclocks pretty well, coming at a stock clock of I believe 3.8 gigahertz. I went ahead and pushed that on up to 4.5 gigahertz with no problem at all, temperature wise or stability wise, so we are good to go on that front. I'm just gonna leave it at 4.5, even though I am guessing I could really push this chip a little bit further, but the VRMs on this motherboard just aren't great, and frankly, if I'm going to sell this later on down the road, I want it to be rock solid for whoever's buying it, so I don't really want to flirt with the edge of this processor's capabilities. 4.5 is a great overclock to begin with. We're just going to stick with that. So in Overwatch at 1080p resolution on the low graphics preset, I normally was seeing FPS in the 50-ish range, though I definitely did see some dips in the frame rate down to about the mid 40s at the lowest and as high as in the 60s. And I will also note that those dips definitely happened when the fighting was a little bit more concentrated, less spread out, and it was a little bit more busy. So under the worst circumstances, you're going to see frame rates down in the sort of mid 40s, maybe in a very heavy firefight, the low 40s. But for the most part, you're going to see frame rates around that 50-ish range. And in Fortnite, I was basically seeing frame rates in the mid 30s to low 30s, very seldom actually dropping below that 30 FPS mark. And even if it did, you could always turn the resolution scaling down from 100% to maybe 90% to make up some of those frames if you get into maybe a heavy, graphically intensive scenario. Maybe there's a lot of people all centered in one location, like the end of a 50v50 fight. But for the most part, 30 to 35 FPS, definitely a playable experience. So at the end of the day, a system like this, even with old hardware bordering on really pushing towards more like ancient hardware, especially when we're talking about the 4300, whereas the 6300, 8320, 8350, those processors may have a little bit more legs left in them than these old quad-core 4300s. But with a decent overclock, you have yourself a very budget-friendly system. And the nice thing about this particular build is that especially once we get the new power supply in, there actually is an upgrade path. If you really wanted to, you could add like an 8320 or an 8350 to this build to upgrade the CPU, or you could add, especially with the new power supply supporting it, you can definitely add a beefier graphics card. So with that in mind though, the 4300 actually looks like, from a percentage of usage perspective, actually looks like it pairs pretty well with an R7 250, so you wouldn't really want to make a huge upgrade to the GPU unless you're planning on upgrading the CPU or just the entire platform down the road. But the case does support ATX systems, so you could very easily pop in something a little bit more modern like a Haswell Intel platform, reuse the RAM in the new platform, and you'd be up and running for a fraction of the cost of replacing the entire platform with a brand new DDR4 platform on like Coffee Lake, Skylake, Kaby Lake, or on the Ryzen platforms. So going used may be the route to upgrade this system, but the case does give you a ton of flexibility with that, whether it be adding drives or changing the platform all the way around. A lot of flexibility in this system, and I think that's going to be one of the draws when I'm going to sell this thing for potential buyers. But of course, I want to kick it back to you guys. What do you think about these old used systems, especially a system like this where for a very low cost you may be able to get a little bit of esports mileage out of it, especially if that's the only reason that you really want to game on a PC. Maybe you're just looking for your Overwatches, your Fortnites, or your League of Legends, that sort of thing. Let me know your thoughts on the system down below. And of course, if you like the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, all those things down below. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos around me from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.